is that? Oh my God, what is that? Oh my God!
And if you found this recording, you have to share it, or it'll be after you too.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Voice from the Mausoleum. Welcome to episode Found Footage Fridays. We initially had an interview that we had planned for this week, but they got some really exciting news, so we pushed it out a little bit till next week to be able to include that news. So you're stuck with just me again for this week. I am just going to do another 5 recommends list. This time the theme is folk found footage horror. These are all movies I'm pretty sure I've talked about before on some version of an episode or have mentioned in previous things in the past, but these are just 5 found footage movies that I think handle the subject of folk horror really, really well, because I think folk horror is incredible and whimsical and scary and just really, really awesome. Typically very creative when done in the horror world. So yes, we'll jump into my list. So the first one I would recommend, if you have not seen this one, is Incantation. Incantation had me low-key worried. I was opening some stuff I shouldn't need to be opening. Incantation does have a couple of little found footage no-nos for me where it switches camera perspectives and it's like, who's holding the camera? And the answer is no one. And some little things like that. But Incantation was so well done, and the story is so well done. It's really eerie. There's some scary moments. There's some, even I would say, some emotional moments as well. But it really takes the idea of folk, religion, horror, and really takes it into new creative territory where you're invested in the story and you want to know more about what's going on, to the point that you're all, you're on in the car with the people for the journey. And I think it is one that a lot of people really liked, honestly. I don't think it's one of those like, a lot of people like to say things are underrated, and they're not. I think people forget what that means. I wouldn't call this underrated. I think this gets a lot of love and appreciation. I want to say this was like one of the first things we ever covered on Found Footage Fridays, and it was me and Tom, and I'm pretty sure we both gave it like 8 or 8.5. It got really high rankings from both of us because it was just really, really well done. I believe it was a Netflix original, so it's probably there if you have not seen it. But ultimately, really, really well shot, compelling story. The acting is phenomenal. The horror aspects are there, and it just has such a cool story under that umbrella of folk horror. So definitely got to be on the list when we're talking about found footage folk horror. The next one I'm going to talk about actually has 2 titles. This one I know I've talked about before because I absolutely love this one. And that's going to be The Borderlands. This is also known as Final Prayer. Why it has 2 names, I think it has something to do with either in the United States, or I can't remember which way it went. One of the names of the movies was already taken and they couldn't get the rights to it, so they had to call it something else for one of the 2 releases, but I can't remember which one. So Borderlands is a slow burn for found footage horror, and as anybody who's watched the channel for any length of time knows, not my cup of tea. But the characters and the set pieces in this and the little bit of blips of discomfort we get are so well done. And the payoff for this is high. It's insane the way that this turns from a haunted church story into something completely different. There's this questioning of religion aspect. There's these 2 people who are very different having to work together on a similar project. And then it just gets really intense in moments, but the ending is insane. It probably would go on another list I could do in the future of like one of the best endings in found footage horror movies ever. It's bleak. It's wild. The body horror is bananas. And it just ultimately was one. I think I went into this one like really blind. I was just like, oh, I'll watch this. I've heard good things. And I walked away from an unforgettable experience. It's such a great movie. It's usually streaming on like Tubi and I think other places, so you'd be able to watch it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, if you're looking for something different, I would absolutely check out Borderlands / Final Prayer, whichever one it comes up under. Sometimes you have to search both. The next one is another one I have mentioned before, and that's Noroi, the Curse. This is another example. When Love Your Life Calls. Okay, so Noroi is one. It's a little long-winded in parts, but it's terrifying and it's creepy and it's told in a really cool format that I think just blends really well together to tell a folk story. From TV broadcasts to interviews, it's when the love of your life calls, you gotta answer. So Noroi is one that I think is just such a weird amalgamation of things. It's a little drawn out, I think. It's kind of longer for a found footage movie, but it's got all these components like TV show clips, interviews, all kinds of different types of found footage mixed together to tell this overall bigger picture story. And it just goes together really well to tell a really unique folk story. It's got some incredibly scary shots, and the acting's really good, and just the overall storytelling. So that's another one I feel like a lot of people know and like. So probably not the first time you've ever heard that one, but if you haven't watched Noroi the Curse, it's really, really good. And it's almost always streaming. So you should check that one out. I'll save that one for last. The next one I'm going to do is Troll Hunter. Okay, so found footage and like monsters is my thing, but like Troll Hunters in particular is just such a fun movie. The design for these things, this is definitely a higher budget, compared to other found footage movies for sure, but doesn't feel very indie. It feels very big budget, big production company. But it's really cool story, and it's got some really beautiful shots. There's some stuff in the dark, in the scenes in the dark when they get to the cave, and ultimately just a really, really cool take on some folklore that, in this case, turned out to be true. That one is also usually streaming, but I'm not sure where, but I'm sure you could find it from somewhere. And if it is only available on like a video on demand or rental, it's worth the price you pay, I promise. Last, but certainly not least, I debated whether I wanted to include this one because I do try to leave this off of list because it's in its own like world on its own pedestal. But I think this was my introduction to not only found footage horror, and quasi like mockumentary / folk horror found footage. And that's the Blair Witch Project. I don't know that there's much else to say. That's a great film. If you haven't seen it by now, what are you doing? It's just this really cool idea of taking like a local legend and really running with it. I would say something that's in a similar vein that maybe be an honorable mention is Butterfly Kisses, which is another really great one that has to do with folk horror. That is very reminiscent of this, where you take this legend you've heard about, other people have talked about it, you've seen, or, whatever. And then you go to try to seek this out and find out if it's real or not. And the Blair Witch really set kind of the standard and the path for all of the found footage that came after it. It wasn't the first found footage movie, obviously, but it was the one that really brought it into the mainstream. And it was such a huge deal on the side of the marketing, and the internet was just kind of starting to be a thing. And they really marginalized on all of those things to just create a really cool time in horror. So yeah, those are my 5 recs for folk found footage. Most of these you've probably seen. If there are some folk ones that I didn't mention, put them in the comments below because I would love to find more. There's a couple others I didn't list here, but I think it's kind of it seems to be like a weird line between folk horror and like monsters. Like there seems to be like a weird divide there. So if you know of folk horror that's found footage, let me know in the comments because I want to watch it. Yeah, well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Found Footage Fridays. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back next week.